Hey Bob, what's the difference between buying a co-op from a sponsor and an individual?
Well, Jason, there are two differences that pop up when you buy a co op from a sponsor versus an individual who's reselling their co op. A sponsor is the person who initially owned the apartment building and then turned it into co ops. And that person, right after they did that transaction, owned all the apartments as the sponsor and then sold off each one, to different individuals, whether they be new people or the current occupants. But generally, when you buy from a sponsor, there are two differences than say buying my co-op. When you buy from a sponsor, the sponsor tries to push off their transfer tax onto the buyer. In a normal transaction, when a person sells, they pay transfer tax. The buyer doesn't pay it. In this circumstance, when you buy from a sponsor, the sponsor says, "Look, I just want X amount of dollars from my co-op. I don't want to know anything about any other expenses." So they say to the buyer, "You're going to pay my transfer taxes." The second point that's different is that when you buy from a sponsor, you don't need board approval. Now, this is a pretty big deal. You hear a lot of stories about boards turning people down, buyers down. Generally, they should only turn them down for financial reasons, but boards do turn people down, and that's a major deterrent for sellers who are trying to get rid of their apartment if the board keeps turning their buyers down. Uh, Not so with a sponsor. The sponsor's purchaser does not need board approval. So the sponsor could theoretically sell to anybody. They don't have to go before the board. Subsequently, when that purchaser sells to somebody, their buyer will have to go before the board. But is a pretty big advantage to buying from a sponsor and not having to go for board approval. So those are the two big things. They push this transfer tax off onto the buyer, but the buyer does not have to go before the board for approval. Those are the two differences when you buy from a sponsor versus buying from an individual.